If you were offered tens of thousands of dollars in interest-free loans and subsidies in exchange for having children, would you take the deal?
Well, it does sound a wee bit tempting. It's an offer that the government of Hungary has been making to couples in an effort to confront the country's chronic underpopulation. After he came to power some 16 years ago, the country's prime minister at the time, the ultra-conservative Viktor Orbán, introduced a slate of aggressive policies to encourage people to have more babies because Hungary's population was shrinking.
And it's not just Hungary. Fertility rates have been falling in certain countries for years. Plenty of them have been trying policies similar to Hungary's. But do any of them actually work? Or are declining birth rates just an inescapable symptom of living in a developed country in the 21st century? From the BBC, I'm Tristan Redman in London.
And I'm Asma Khalid in Washington, D.C. And welcome to The Global Story on YouTube.
I'm Stephanie Hegarty, and I'm the BBC's global population correspondent.
Well, we're so pleased to have you here today, Stephanie. I'm quite nerdy and passionate about demographic stories, so I'm excited to talk this all through with you. We're going to start with something remarkable that we haven't shared yet with Asma and Stephanie. I'd be intrigued to see if you have seen this already, but we're going to share with you a little picture which we're going to get up on the screen here. And we're just going to have you describe what you're seeing here, please, Stephanie.
An attractive young couple embracing each other on a billboard. I've seen these actually in Hungary in English. This is in Hungarian, but I think I can guess what it says.
What would be your guess about what it says?
Something about family-friendly Hungary?
It's not so much the words we're interested in here. Now, this is a question for both of you, Asma and Stephanie.
It's a test. Yes.
Do you recognize the couple in the picture?
No.
Asma?
No. I mean, they looked a bit like that for a second. There was that meme off that you saw that went around everywhere.
Yeah.
Do you know that meme where it's like...
the guy who's checking out some other girl.
Yes, yeah. Am I right, Tristan?
Very good.
Are they the meme guys?
Wow.
Really?
That is good meme knowledge. Wow. What do they call this guy again? There's a name for him.
They're called, I think the name is distracted boyfriend or guy looking at another girl. Now, so what we're seeing in the Hungarian billboard is actually not the girl that the guy is checking out, but his actual girlfriend.
Yeah, I was wondering which girl. Yeah, let's go back to that for a second.
Sitting on a sofa, and they are sort of in a, they're having a cuddly moment, and they're looking very happy, and they're promoting Hungarian birth rates and why it's good to have kids in Hungary. So my question to both of you, given that this couple are arguably the couple on planet Earth who maybe have the most famously some tension in their relationship, do you think you would advise them to have a family together?
Maybe they've been through a lot of therapy and worked through their issues. Who knows?
What do you think, Asma?
Who am I to judge?
Exactly.
That was some very good fence sitting there, Asma. Well done. This takes us to the main meat and veg of what we're here to talk about today, because really what this is all about is attempts by the Hungarian government to get people to have more babies. Now, Hungary is a particular example of a country in the developed world. There are many which have declining birth rates. But Hungary is a particularly intriguing case study, and you've been reporting on it, Stephanie. Why is Hungary so interesting in this story?
So I went to Hungary not only because they have this fascinating example of what happens when you try to throw a lot of money at this issue of fertility decline, but also because the BBC World Service is launching a new Hungarian service. So a platform in Hungarian for a Hungarian audience that will look at news, politics, but also society and culture. So Hungary, in 2010, when Viktor Orbán came into power, he embarked on these really ambitious pro-natalist policies, so policies to convince people to have more children. And he threw a huge amount of money at the problem. probably arguably more than any other country in the world. It was 4 to 5% of GDP, billions every year. And it was a whole array of policies to try and convince people to have babies. And there's an upfront payment, which is quite a lot of money that couples can get. It's about $35,000 that couples can get when they plan, say, when they promise to have children. And they have to have them within the next 5 years. Then there's tax breaks that increase with every child that you have. There's really generous maternity pay. You can take 3 years off work and still get paid if you decide to go back to work
3 years
early.
off work.
Yeah, that would be stunning for Americans, I imagine.
Yes. You're lucky if you get 5 months, and that's extraordinarily generous.
Yeah, and then you can also get mortgage subsidies to help renovate your home, to buy a bigger car. And they also increased the number of childcare places across the country quite dramatically. So there was really wide range of help, and a lot of it financial for young couples once they promised and once they delivered on that promise to have more kids.
Are these policies available across the board, regardless of your income, regardless of your marital status even?
These policies were designed only for married couples, only for heterosexual couples, and designed in such a way that they're only available to people in the formal job market, and the informal job market is just under 15%, so pretty big in Hungary.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And they're also tied to income. So the richer you are, the better you're going to fare in all of this. So all of these were initiatives by Viktor Orbán, and he was quite upfront when announcing this, and his government was quite upfront, that the objective was to have Hungarian babies rather than supplement the population with immigrants. Fertility is declining in most of Western Europe, in the US, but our populations on the whole continue to grow, and partly because of immigration. Viktor Orbán was very clear. He said from the off, we want to get our replacement rate back to the level where we can naturally replace our population ourselves without having to bring people in from abroad.
Stephanie, when we look at government initiatives to boost having babies, this is happening in the context of a number of countries seeing fertility rates decline. Here in the United States, for example, the fertility rate is 1.6 births per woman. We've heard a lot about the need for people to have a certain number of children in order to keep the population at a steady rate, to replace the population. What does that mean?
So if we want to keep the population stable, forget immigration or outmigration, if you just want to keep the population among the people who are already in the country stable, every woman, every couple, but every woman is how it's kind of characterized, needs to have 2.1 children over the course of their lifetime. The 2 is obvious, that's to replace the mom and to replace the dad. And the 0.1 is for those who might die early or die early in childhood. So that is the kind of golden number, 2.1. When your fertility rate is at 2.1, your population will be stable, irregardless of immigration or emigration.
Okay, so this is an issue which is affecting large swathes of the developed world. How did Hungary get into this situation in the first place?
So a lot of countries in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Soviet Union saw a lot of emigration, and their fertility rates declined because economies were struggling and a lot of young people were leaving. So Hungary, like a lot of other countries in the region, ended up with really low fertility rates. It also had a declining population because so many people were leaving.
Well, can we talk a sec about Viktor Orbán? How do his political views as a kind of well-known hard right political leader in Europe play into all of this and inform his views on population growth?
So this was 2010. It was just around the time that we were starting to see a huge amount of immigrants come into Europe as a result of the Arab Spring and the war in Syria. So this all informed his policy over the next 16 years. And he was very clear. We want Hungarian babies. Hungary thinks differently. We are not willing to offset our population decline with immigrants. So it was definitely a right-wing message, a far-right message in some respects. But it was also my sense is, from being in Hungary 2 weeks ago, is that it is quite a popular sentiment.
These are things which are deeply, deeply personal for families. What did the families that you met with in Hungary tell you about these policies and how they're affecting them?
So we spoke to one very happy family of 5 children, and they said the policies have been really helpful in them building their family, and they were taking advantage of almost all of them. The dad is Mate Gorundi. He's eligible for lots of tax breaks that increase with each child. And the mom, Aggie, she doesn't work at the moment, but if she does go back to work, because she has more than 2 children, she doesn't have to pay any income tax at all. That used to be,
wow.
yeah, that used to be for families of 4 or more, and now it's for 2 or more. So any woman with more than 2 children below a certain age will pay no income tax at all. So they were really
5 children, though, you mentioned. Wow.
5
Under what? What's the age gap?
under 9. And
Under 9. Oh,
what they
wow.
told us was they have 5 at the moment. So
Okay.
yeah, they were really they spoke glowingly about the policies, and they said that in their neighborhood they've noticed that big families with 4 or 5 kids are quite common. But that doesn't really seem to be borne out by the statistics. But that's a kind of wealthy suburban neighborhood of Budapest, and they're exactly the kind of people that I think Orbán and his party were targeting with these policies. But we spoke to several other families. So a couple in the city who have 1 child so far and plan to have 2, and they did take advantage of some of these as well, but they said it didn't actually affect how many children they were going to have. And I think this is the more common experience, that people will of course take advantage of the essentially free money that they're entitled to, but that it may not really affect their really life-altering plans or intentions when it comes to having kids.
Do you mean that they were intending to have kids anyway, and that the
exactly.
the government subsidies were just a bonus on top of that?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, you've also been speaking to a family that's really been struggling to have kids. What did they tell you?
So when these loans came out about 5 years ago, you had to promise to have your first child within the next 5 years, or you would be liable for penalty interest. And we spoke to this young couple, Barbara and Levi, who have been trying, doing everything in their power to have a child. And as soon as they figured out they couldn't conceive naturally, things got really, really complicated for them. They have managed in that time to fit in 3 rounds of IVF. And when we first met them,
Through the loan money, presumably?
yeah, I mean, some of the IVF is sponsored by the Hungarian government, but of course, as with many government schemes, there's a lot of delays. You have to do it in certain government facilities, and those are often far away, hard for people to get to. And yeah, the facility that they used, it was 45 minutes from their house. So Barbara said it was always hard to get off work, that her bosses were understanding, but it was just a nightmare to fit all of this in, because she had to go to those particular clinics. So they'd had to do quite a few things on the privately just to speed things up. So it was all very, very bureaucratic and difficult, and is huge. I mean, Barbara had a stack of paperwork that she's been gathering over the years, not only to make sure she does everything by the book, so that she can show the government how hard she's tried to have a child, but also to make sure that if it doesn't happen, that they're not on the hook for these huge payments. So when we first met them, it was just the night before. They were going back for a blood test. They'd done an embryo transfer 10 days before, and it was their 3rd time. So they were obviously incredibly anxious not just about whether they might be pregnant or not, but also whether they, this loan is still hanging over them. What's going to happen if they don't get good news? And yeah, we were with them the following day, where sadly they found out that she wasn't pregnant. And they may have to try, that was their 3rd attempt at IVF, they may have to go through 5 rounds to prove that they tried hard enough, so that they don't have to pay this penalty interest. And it's a lot of money. Their repayments could quadruple to almost an amount equivalent to Levi, who's a chef, to his salary.
Well, we should emphasize that Viktor Orbán was just very recently voted out of office, and he's been replaced by a new prime minister called Peter Magyar. Do we know if Magyar intends to pursue the same policies that Orbán instituted?
Yeah, it's likely that he will. They said on the campaign trail, the policies are popular, and the campaign trail they didn't. They said that they, on the whole, would. At the moment, they've told us that they're reviewing the policies and that they're going to announce their plan soon. But the new government has also said that they're looking at ways to help people who couldn't have the children that they promised they would.
I mean, having kids and trying to have kids is a incredibly stressful, or it can at least be for some people, an incredibly stressful experience. I mean, I can't get my head around what it must be like adding that extra layer of stress around loans into the bargain. I mean, how do they feel about all of this?
Yeah, I mean, Barbara said it was a huge cloud kind of hanging over her and definitely adding a whole layer of anxiety to an already intensely anxious experience and process. Barbara said she's just not sure she can do another 2 rounds. It's been so difficult.
Well, do these incentives ever work, Stephanie? I'm sitting here talking to you from Paris. Now, France has believed itself to be underpopulated since the 17th century. And they've been trying these kind of incentive packages. It's a long time. They've been trying incentive packages almost all of that time. They exist to this day. And France, if France had the fertility rate that it's supposed to have, it would have something like a population of 150 million people. It's way, way short of that. Like, do these things ever work?
What do you mean by supposed to have?
If France had the same population growth that Britain has, for example, it would be around 150 million in population. As it is, it has a population of almost the same size as Britain's, give or take. But given the size of the country, it should be much, much larger. And they've tried very hard to incentivize people to have children, not just over the last decade, but over literally centuries. And there's no evidence that that's worked. But does it ever work?
I mean, some would argue that they did work in Hungary, that they did help to boost the fertility rate over a short period, and that maybe there are a certain section of the population who really would like to have more children but can't because of finances. But the limits of the effects of the limits of these policies shows that section of the population is probably quite small. The most people will, if they want to have a large family, they will do their best to do it, whatever their circumstances. Many people just don't.
Stephanie, you've explained that falling fertility rates are not distinct to Hungary. This is a trend we've seen in a number of other countries. And I want to know if other nations are looking, if other governments are looking at what Hungary has done. Are they trying to replicate this? Are they taking on other incentive programs of their own, trying to encourage people to make more babies?
I think governments will be looking at this, but there will be very few that will be willing to spend this much money, 4 to 5% of GDP. But South Korea has been trying for a long time to boost fertility rates with upfront payments and childcare subsidies and large amounts of money given to couples if they have a child. So the South Korean government offers parents upfront payments of about $30,000 per child when the child is born, and then help every month, as well as vouchers to help them pay for childcare and various other incentives. So there is quite a package available to Korean parents when they do have children. But it hasn't made any dint really on the fertility rate. The fertility rate has just continued to drop, actually.
It has one of the lowest fertility rates, right, in the world?
Yes, it has the lowest fertility rate in the world. And it did when they started these programs as well, but it just continued to slide. So I think in a certain sense it shows the limits of trying to give people money to convince them to have babies, and it just shows how complex that decision is. It certainly seems to help some people. There are demographers who will argue in the past few years, South Korea's fertility rate, it went down to 0.7. That's the lowest in the world and the lowest that the world has ever seen. But it's back up to 0.8 this year. So some people would argue, well, that is the positive effect of all of these policies. And others will argue, well, no, I think they just hit rock bottom and, it's just fluctuating.
Why is their fertility rate so low, Stephanie?
So there are many different theories, but I think one of the main conflicts, lots of different issues in South Korea really, the cost of living is very high. The cost of parenting is very high. And that's for a few things that are unique to that region. One is education. So they have this intense cram school culture where parents have to pay for their children to go to school after school to have all of this tutoring. And that's all very expensive. It's highly competitive education scene, highly competitive workplace. So you have a dynamic where people are expected to work very late. And when a couple gets married, the expectation is that the man will continue to work. And when a couple gets married and has kids, the expectation is the man will continue to work late and the woman will not. And the effect of that is twofold. One, that women feel like they end up doing a lot of the domestic work and the childcare, as well as having to hold down a job. And they have to do that on their own. And the theory is that that's not a very attractive prospect for young Korean women anymore. The other thing is that the effect is it creates a lot of discrimination in the workplace. So young women, when they get to the age of getting married and having kids, their bosses start to discriminate against them in the workplace. They're just not expected to be as competitive as men. And so the theory there is that young women are saying, no, I'm not going to get married. I'm not going to have children because I don't want to send my boss the message that I'm not competitive enough. So yeah, it had that competitive work culture is just not conducive to family life in any way.
You mentioned specifically what was going on in South Korea, but broadly, this is happening in so many countries. Do we have a sense of why?
So the why, the big why it's been happening since the 1950s, I suppose, in many places, is that we have access to really reliable contraception. And that's come along with a huge boom in female education and women entering the workforce. So we now have economies in most parts of the world where both parents do have to work. But in the past 5 years, since the pandemic, we've seen this rapid fertility decline. And that's likely to do with all of the uncertainty that we've seen since the pandemic. So fertility rates did drop during COVID, and that's quite common that when we have crises and we have instability and people aren't sure about the future and people are scared, they naturally, think it's not the best time to have a child. And that there's been such a long tail to that. We then had the Ukraine war and the inflation issues that are also global trends. We now have the war in Iran and inflation again. And then the macro, then these much bigger patterns of instability and insecurity, like a very toxic political environment, a lot of conflict, social media that is creating a lot more conflict in society. All of these macro patterns contribute to just a feeling of instability. Climate change, AI now. I think there are lots of indicators that people are just not feeling as safe or stable about the state of the world.
If all the measures that a country like Hungary has thrown at this problem in the last decade and a half haven't entirely worked, are there any tactics that high-level demographers would say, look, you need to try this is going to work? Is there anything that's not being tried and might work?
Well, there was a lot of consensus around in the 2000s around what was happening in Scandinavia. So take Sweden as an example. They had introduced a whole raft of policies that were, the purpose of them ostensibly was to promote gender equality and a kind of healthier work-life balance. But things like shared parental leave, huge childcare subsidies made childcare almost free, and various other policies that really worked to make having a family and working more cohesive. And I think that they did have an effect on the societies there where it is acceptable, it was acceptable even in the early 2000s for mums or dads to have to leave work early to pick up a sick child or to go to a ballet recital. And in the 2000s, Sweden, as an example, did see a boost in fertility. So Sweden's fertility rate increased from 1.5 to 2, and 2 is almost replacement rate. But then from the 2010s on, it started to decline again, and now it's at 1.5, which really is lower than France, for example. So that really
And they still have
perplexed-
those policies.
Yeah, they still have
right?
the policies. And that did perplex a lot of researchers because they thought, oh, the Nordic model it solved this conflict between feminism and fertility by making it easier for both moms and dads to work and have a family. And now it's not so clear that is the case.
Stephanie, if you're lucky enough to live in a developed society that's relatively stable, is it just an inevitable consequence of that you're going to have a declining fertility rate and potentially a declining population?
It may be, and that certainly seems to be the pattern. But we don't know. You know, I don't think there's any hard and fast rule on this. If you take Israel as an example, Israel is one of the few OECD, one of the few developed economies that has a replacement rate higher than 2.1. I think their fertility rate is around 3 at the moment. And that's not just, you know, a big chunk of that is because they have Orthodox society where there is tendency to have really large families, 6-7 kids. But among secular Israelis, the fertility rate is still really high. And that's because of a culture of having children and a philosophy and ideology around survival of the Israeli state and survival of Judaism as a result of the Holocaust, of course, and as a result of their insecure position in the region. So that's culture, ideology, philosophy that's really driving people to have more kids. And of course, a family-friendly culture and
And do they have free IVF as well? Because I talked to an old colleague of mine.
They do, yeah. And you know, above average spending on pro-family benefits and policies, but certainly nothing in the league of Hungary. So I think it's a good example of how important culture is in this, you know, culture at a wide societal level.
Stephanie, I could ask you questions about this all afternoon, so maybe you can come back and do another demographics episode again with us soon. It's been so great talking it through with you. Thank you.
It's been so great. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And that's it for The Global Story on YouTube today. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed our show, then I've got to mention The Global Story is also available as an audio podcast. You can find us every weekday on bbc.com or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.